Welcome back to the Grease Goblins Rereads channel. Today we're going to be doing Arya VII. We have finally really gotten to Harrenhal. We saw a little bit of it at the end of her last chapter, but we're fully at Harrenhal now. Arya has been here a bit of time now. She understands what her duties and roles in Harrenhal are, and Harrenhal has made her feel as small as ever. A lot of her ability to have freedom and to do what she wants to do has been more limited than it's ever been. That's kind of why she starts taking on this persona of being like a mouse in Harrenhal, because she feels so small. And this is a really good chapter in my opinion, because I think it really gets to the theme of Arya as a character. There's a lot of things that get introduced here that are vital to her story. The first one being really Jaqen and the Faceless Men plot, as we're going to see her list her first name in this chapter, as well as her using a lot of kind of techniques like a spy would, right? Of not making yourself known to people, but also gaining a lot of information. She picks up on a lot of rumors, for instance, in this chapter. But let's start on page 341 and not waste any time. The towers of Harrenhal, which had once been grand, are now ghostly towers. They feel corrupted and really not maintained very well, like the Tower of Dread, the Widow's Tower, and even King's Spire, which all loom over Arya. Arya, now called Weasel, sleeps on straw beneath the Wailing Tower. Life is hard, but it was better than it was on the road. There's soap, water, bread, and stew, and even the occasional bit of meat. And again, that gets to the real big root of the issue if you're the Lannisters. You do need to treat your prisoners relatively okay because you need people to maintain this large castle of Harrenhal. Something we really saw in House of the Dragon that we didn't see in Game of Thrones at all was how large Harrenhal really is, how many servants and people need to be able to run the actual castle. It's one of the reasons why most people do not want Harrenhal, because it costs more to keep the castle and all that stuff than it is worth to actually rule Harrenhal. That's why Littlefinger, for instance, uses just being the Lord of Harrenhal as a title. He doesn't actually care about the castle itself. Hot Pie has found his place in the kitchens and eats well. When Arya is sent to fetch food, they sometimes sneak a few words. He still calls her Ari, forgetting the name change. Once he tried to gift her a tart, but was caught and beaten. It really tells you that this camp is about order. Even small things like, Hot Pie trying to give his friend food is frowned upon. This is war, right? Every little small amount of food is valuable here. You can't be giving other people more than they need to live. And so that's a part of it. If you're Arya, right, you have very few people that you're actually acquainted with that you can maybe call your friends, Hot Pie and Gendry being the only two. And as we hear from Arya, Arya really hasn't seen Gendry much at all, or even been able to speak to him as he works in the forges. She keeps her distance from the other servants, most older than her, refusing to learn their names. If you didn't know someone, it hurt less when they died. Arya has experienced tremendous trauma at this point. She's watched as pretty much everybody she knew, after leaving King's Landing is dead. There hasn't been much in the way of happiness for Arya. She's witnessed her father dying, her sister is a captive, the rest of her family is at war at this point. Yoren has died. Any of the other people that she even knew, came to bad fates with that Night's Watch party. Even think about the people that deserted Arya and her little small party before they got captured. It's been a really rough time. And so if you're Arya, you completely understand this. You don't want to, maybe make a friend with somebody and then one day you find they're killed because they disobeyed a command. You completely understand Arya. As we get to page 342, Arya continues to think about how Harrenhal is enormous, crumbling, and eerie. Lady Went, who once ruled it, used only a fraction of its space. Now fled, she's left behind a skeleton staff, and Tywin Lannister has moved in with a host of soldiers and noble prisoners, stretching the place beyond its capacity. Rumor says he plans to make it his seat after the war. This is just nonsense, right? This is just rumors and all of that stuff, because Harrenhal is this really big, and it used to be a very grand fortress before Aegon came upon it, but at this point, there's no big lords that are ever going to be able to really restore Harrenhal to what it truly was, unless you have somebody that's really rich who is probably a lord of another castle already. And so you maybe have two families ruling two big castles. So, like, if for it to actually be restored, it would have to be somebody like Tywin, right? Where maybe in a perfect world for Tywin, Jaime is ruling Casterly Rock. He returns Harrenhal to its heights and maybe he gets some of the incomes rewards of being able to bring that castle back up. But at this point, it's just every time this castle is giving to some minor family, maybe because of their loyalty or whatnot, they're only going to use a portion of it. A lot of these families are small. You think about the Slints, right? Janus Slint was given Harrenhal. How was he going to ever man this castle, right? And so you think about that, and then you go from that point where this castle is really only used in wartime to a really big effect. You go years and years and years with all these places just being deserted. Maybe you're trying to, sell a house that hasn't been lived in for a couple years. And you think about how dirty it is, stuff like that. There's television shows that are all about stuff like that. It would be like that to the extreme. And so that's what Arya's job has been. And it's why there's all these prisoners coming into Harrenhal. It's to fix up the castle, make it decent to live in. As Arya notes, her duties are endless, running messages, serving food, hauling water, cleaning decaying towers, and clearing out bats and rats. The restoration is grueling, with whole floors long abandoned and full of filth. Some claim the place is haunted, but Arya scoffs at that. It's not ghosts that scare her, it's men. We really get a foreshadowing of this in the last chapter when she arrives to Harrenhal. We get like how Hot Pie thinks about Harrenhal being this haunted place and he doesn't want to go in there. And Arya kind of thinks like that's not really what you should be worried about. Arya's completely right. Ghosts may exist in Harrenhal, and there's been a lot of speculation around that. There's also been things like what we saw in the TV show House of the Dragon with someone like Alice Rivers maybe performing magic because of the connection that Harrenhal has. You could also think of maybe, this blood sacrifice was performed with Aegon, destroying Black Heron and his sons and all that stuff. Maybe that just had some presence of ghosts there, whatever. And so that could all be true. But in a time of war, when you have people committing atrocities and all this stuff, men are the people that you should fear. They are the ones that can kill you at just a whim, right? Maybe you didn't get their drink to them quick enough. Okay, well, there you go. They can just lop your head off for no reason, right? That's really where Arya's at. She has to keep a low profile. And this is just a grueling place to live at right now because you come into some situation where you just have a number of responsibilities, right? There's never going to be a situation when living in Harrenhal where you can't be doing something. You think about how busy a war camp is, then put it to the fact that Harrenhal needs to also be restored. Arya thinks that the real danger lies with men like Wheeze, her brutal overseer, and people like Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain. Wheeze, in particular, is petty, cruel, and always watching, quick with a blow, or worse. His vicious dog enforces his will, as Arya once watched it maul a boy while Wheeze laughed. Now, this is something that was completely cut from the television show. We didn't get to see this character of Wheeze, who is somebody that seems to be able to look into your soul and see disobedience. He's somebody that is extremely cruel, and you can understand why Arya will want him dead later on in the story as her second name. But again, just really tough conditions for Arya as she's basically being beaten down, right? She's not being able to have any type of freedom. All of the fight is seeming to go from her. We also know that Tywin Lannister himself resides in the ruined King's Spire Tower, still towering but warped by fire. Now, one thing I will say on the choice here is everything is about showing power. Of course, Tywin is going to take the King's Spire Tower. Think about the name, right? The King Tower. Of course, he's going to take that. Even if it looks maybe disgusting, it shows that essence of power that Tywin has. Arya sometimes dreams of marching up to him and declaring herself Arya Stark, but she knows better. She'd never reach him for one, and Whis would make her pay. And also, would Tywin even believe her? I would highly doubt that some random girl that's come in as a prisoner, during one of these towns being raided or whatnot, declaring themselves as Arya Stark is actually Arya. Now, if they questioned her for a while, they would be able to figure it out. But it's would she get to that phase? And I just don't think so. I plainly don't think so. I think most people believe that she is dead at this point. But again, we don't know because Arya doesn't really do it. And I think that's a smart move. Because either way, she would just become a captive. That's what she would become. Eventually, she'd probably be married off to someone like Tommen, or whenever Joffrey and Marjorie have children, maybe they marry one of those to Arya. Like, either way, Arya would be used as a pawn, regardless. As we get into page 343, Arya's nightly prayers continue as she does this dark ritual of remembrance, but also vengeance. The first name on her lips is Whis, her immediate tormentor. She repeats the names like a spell, afraid of forgetting even one, because in a lot of ways, her forgetting a name would be like forgetting the past things that have been done to her and people maybe that she cared about, or the innocent people in her eyes. And so for Arya, it's yes about a revenge, but it's also about remembering the past. Arya then thinks about how on the road Arya had been prey, just a sheep among wolves and soldiers. But in Harrenhal, she's a mouse, small, unnoticed, and hiding in shadows. She embraces invisibility as a survival tactic, yet this concealment also becomes a source of power, as mice do seem to go unnoticed. Again, there's a little couple nods in House of the Dragon with mice being able to hear things, or maybe they're being warged by Lara Strong. The same applies here. Mice would be able to hear things that maybe they shouldn't be hearing, and that's something we do get with Arya. But also the thing here is, if you're Arya, you're this girl that everybody believes is basically just this common born girl that's basically a servant now. Nobody cares about her, and so nobody's going to pay a second thought about her or any of those things. She's able to pick up on this knowledge, and that's some of the training that we'll see with Arya later on in the story, especially as we see her assassination missions with the Faceless Men, especially her last chapter in A Dance with Dragons. You see a lot of what she's doing here later on. So again, it's all these signs that I think Jaqen takes an interest in Arya because of. She notices the scale of Harrenhal, reinforcing the sense of her feeling small. The castle isn't just large, it's inhuman. It makes even Gregor Clegane the Mountain seem diminished. Arya feels like she's living in the bones of a dead giant, and this dwarfs not only her, but even the so-called mighty. It adds, again, this eerie and cursed feeling to this castle. It's larger than life. It's so big. And think about this if you're Arya. Arya comes from a relatively big castle in Winterfell, and even she is amazed by the size of Harrenhal. Think about if you're just a common person, you're a farmer, for instance, and you come to Harrenhal. It's just crazy to think about. And it even shows you even more why Black Heron would have been so confident about his castle. It is just so much bigger, so much mightier than any other castle in Westeros. Unfortunately, in a traditional war sense, he would be correct. That's why Tywin goes to Harrenhal. It's this great defensible position. Its location is amazing. But dragons are a different beast. Despite her size, Arya learns to listen. She becomes a gatherer of secrets, who's sleeping with whom. We actually get a little bit of a note to Paya, the girl that we'll end up seeing later on with Jaime, when he comes to Harrenhal both times, one as a prisoner and one as the leader of an army. She also finds out people that, mock the ghost while being afraid of the dark, who wets the bed, who spits in the food. For instance, Harris Swift's food seems to be getting spit in, which is kind of hilarious. And then more dangerously, that apparently the rumor is spreading in Harrenhal that Joffrey is a bastard. That letter has been, reached to these Western lords. And this kind of grows into Arya's understanding that maybe she can't be the traditional swordsman, but she can be the traditional type of spy, assassin, and sometimes knowledge is more important than other things. It's something that Littlefinger preaches. She also learns things like Stannis and Renly both claiming the crown, and even within the Lannister camp, there's doubt about Joffrey's hold on the throne. Right now, Joffrey has no power. Right now, all Joffrey has is Tyrion and the men that he's been able to gather in his defenses, and people obviously doubt Tyrion. So right now, it's a really tricky situation that they find themselves in. And we get a really great line here that really just shows the way people would view Westeros at the moment. The realm has more kings than a castle's got rats. It's just there's a king everywhere. We then run back into the name of Beric Dondarrion, as there's just these bunch of campfire tales being spread about Beric. He's a figure of almost myth at this point because it's said he's been killed so many different times, but yet it doesn't ever seem like he truly stays dead. And that gets us to page 344. Arya hears these rumors about Beric Dondarrion that he's been killed multiple times by different people, Amory, Lorch, Gregor Clegane, and etc. But people joke he never stays dead, which is true. We do know that to be the case, but Arya at this point kind of just thinks this guy's a myth at this point. 2 weeks seem to pass as the brave companions, aka the Bloody Mummers, arrive at Harrenhal. They ride under a banner of a black goat with bloody horns, and their company includes a very interesting band of men. Men with bells braided into their hair, seeming to be Dothraki, lancers on black and white striped horses, archers with powdered cheeks, men with dyed beards, feathered cloaks, or scarred faces, a fool and motley, a fake septon, and a fake maester. It's really weird and interesting party. it tells you right away this is no normal force from Westeros. This is a sellsword group, which right away is going to tell you something else. These are people you can't trust. Their loyalty is earned with gold. Arya then describes their leader being Vargo Hoat, who is extremely tall and thin, long, ropey black beard. He wears a black goat head helm, has a chain of mismatched coins around his neck, and rides one of the striped horses. Weeze warns Arya to avoid them, especially Hoat, which is very wise advice. These are not the type of people that you want to get mingled up with. Weeze says to call him lord or risk being hurt. Soldiers say he's not really a lord, just a slobbering sellsword, but that isn't something you want to say in front of Vargo Hoat. Arya wonders how many monsters Tywin commands, which is very fascinating given the fact that we know the Brave Companions are going to switch to the other side. It's going to make Arya think about maybe the moral complexity of this war. The Brave Companions are housed in the Widow's Tower away from Arya's duties. As that night, a fight breaks out. A squire from Sir Harris Swift's camp is killed, and 2 of the Bloody Mummers are wounded. It shows you right away kind of how people view these sellswords. We always get this idea that in Westeros, sellswords are not viewed very highly because these are men selling their swords and all that stuff, whereas in Westeros, it's about chivalry. You should, fight for your liege lord and all that stuff, and I don't know. I mean, you look at what people do for the liege lord, it's like, why are we even fighting? Like, something that I think is really compelling about the Battle of the Trident is, Rhaegar's side of things, his camp. One of the reasons I believe they lose is like, what are you fighting for? If you're a common soldier and you're in Rhaegar's army, what are you truly fighting for? I think that's a really interesting point here, but that'll get us into page 345. We see Tywin Lannister's power and his influence, and how people always have to really suck up to him. As the next morning, Tywin Lannister hangs both bloody mummers involved in the fight, plus a archer who had provoked them about Beric Dondarrion. After the executions, Vargo Hoat and Sir Harris Swift theatrically embrace and kiss, swearing loyalty to each other as Tywin watches. It's all a play. Tywin is forcing, it feels like Tywin is forcing his kids to, make up. That's how it feels like. And we know there's going to be more conflict to come. Arya finds Hoat's lisp and slobbering funny, but knows better than to laugh. But the bloody mummers soon leave Harrenhal once again to go plunder, to go take more captives, and we know to eventually switch over to Roos's side. Before they go, Arya overhears talk that Roose Bolton has taken the Ruby Ford of the Trident. And this is kind of big news, but kind of not. It's like, oh yeah, Roose is advancing, but we all know that Roose is not going to do anything without Robb Stark's army. That's not who Roose is. Roose is a very cautious commander, not wanting to basically weaken his own position. So what he's going to do is take the available space. Roose knows that Tywin is waiting in Harrenhal. There's no reason that he should actually attack Harrenhal. He can take the land that's open at the moment. A Lannister archer claims Tywin will crush him like he did at the Green Fork, but others doubt it. They say Bolton won't move until Robb Stark arrives from Riverrun with his northern army and direwolves, which is true. You got to remember, the Battle of the Green Fork was not a true battle. It was a battle that was to distract Tywin. It was to make sure that he didn't send any type of aid to Jaime, and to make sure all of his focus was fixed on this army coming south with Roose. So again, the battle was never meant to be a victory by Roose, even though there is an argument that Roose could have won the battle, but he didn't really try it, right? He took the southern forces, the Lannister forces, very unaware. He could have possibly attacked them before they were ready, but we never get to that point because it was all kind of a setup. Arya is surprised and hopeful to hear Robb is close. She dreams of seeing her family again. For Arya, you got to remember she has gotten very little information onto the whereabouts of her family, and knowing that Robb is, at Riverrun, it's not all that far, right? It's maybe a day or two ride from Harrenhal to Riverrun, if that. I'm not even sure how long it is, but it's not that far of an actual journey to Riverrun from where she is. She learns that 3 dozen captives from a Green Fork battle are kept in the Tower of Dread. They're free to move about the castle as long as they swear not to escape. And Arya thinks they could still help her escape, though, which is weird, right? If these people are captives, they can't get out themselves. How would they get Arya out? And that's the other part of it. You think about the Lannisters, it's always said that, oh, they treat their prisoners really badly, and that's the way Arya thinks about it. But it also shows you, if you're the nobles, how better treated they are than these regular prisoners, but also they're given freedom of the castle. Like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good if you're a prisoner. It's almost the best you can kind of hope for. The captives dine in the hall of 100 hearths and are visible around the grounds. 4 brothers, including 3 Freys and their bastard brother, train daily in the Flowstone yard. They are ransomed by 2 more Frey brothers who arrive with gold. It's very important to understand this, that of all of the captives, the Frey ones are the ones that are actually ransomed. Kind of shows you their wealth. And also, again, you got to remember, a lot of these northern families that would have the gold to ransom these people, they're ways away. And also, you got to remember this is probably that first connection that the Freys and Lannisters get towards the Red Wedding, right? Is maybe the way they're treated is maybe something that reflects good on Tywin for them. But as we continue, no one ransoms the northern prisoners. One fat lordling, who we know to be a Manderly, hangs around the kitchens. Another, a fierce young man with black cloak patterned with white suns, walks the battlements. He was taken by a hedge knight hoping for a ransom. Just tells you how some of the maybe smaller people who are just looking for some way of, going up in their life do things, right? Take maybe a noble, maybe you can get some gold for it. As we get into page 346, Arya couldn't identify some of the northern captives because she'd never paid attention to titles or sigils in her lessons with Septim or Dane. Arya didn't care about those things. Arya wanted to be, trained how to fight and things like that. But she also is a little bit like almost bitter towards like Sansa. Like Sansa would know all this stuff. She's somebody that paid attention. We know that to be true because of, well, the tourney in book 1. She's able to identify a lot of people based off their sigils. Something that really could help is something that could really help Arya right about now, but unfortunately, she just didn't pay attention. She remembered Lord Cerwyn, though, whose lands were near Winterfell. He and his son Clay had visited often. Cerwyn was the only captive never seen, as he was confined to a tower cell with a wound. And if you're Arya, this has got to be the worst thing, right? You don't know who any of these people are, you have no connection to any of them, but the one you do have is the one that's locked away and you haven't seen. For a little while, Arya had some hope to see him and imagined he might help her escape if he recognized her, possibly by paying sellswords with gold. Now, this is what I would say here. If you're Arya, you're on the right track. The best way that you could do this is when you're ransomed, right? Say that you maybe need a servant, or maybe you recognize this girl, right? That she's some, servant that used to be at your castle or something. You can make a lot of maybe excuses as to why you would want Arya to come with you. And that could maybe get her out of this situation. But again, you're banking on a lot. You're banking on Lord Cerwyn to actually be ransomed, and as we have seen with the Northern Lords, that hasn't really happened. But Arya's hope was soon diminished as one morning she saw the Silent Sisters loading a corpse into a wagon. It was Lord Cerwyn, dead and sewn into a fine cloak with a battle axe sigil. The news felt like a blow to Arya, and she told herself he couldn't have helped her anyway. He couldn't help himself, let alone help her. And so Arya once again feels defeated, and she goes back to her normal duties, cleaning, hiding, and eavesdropping. As rumors about Tywin Lannister's plans swirl, some think he's going to march on Riverrun. Some think he's going to go to King's Landing to defeat Stannis. Some think maybe he's going to court Lysa Arryn and get her alliance. It just tells you these people have no idea what's going on right now. They're just making up speculation based on the situation. Some said he was forging swords to kill the Stark wargs or negotiating peace with Lady Stark to free Jaime. Again, basically, every rumor that you could possibly think of is what's being said because people are bored. They're bored of sitting at Harrenhal waiting for something to happen, and that's what Tywin's doing. He's waiting. Though ravens came and went daily, Tywin mostly stayed behind closed doors with his war council. Arya occasionally glimpsed him walking with maesters and the fat captive, riding to the camps or watching men train from the gallery. Tywin stood with his hands on the gold pommel of his sword. It was said he loved gold more than anything, and even that he shit gold, which obviously is not true, but it is the way Tywin is built up, right? Tywin is this character that is almost like a myth. Like he's this character that is just so much better than everyone else. That's the way Tywin's persona comes off as. He looks strong for his age, with golden whiskers and a bald head. His stern face reminded Arya of her father, not in appearance, but in bearing, what she thought of as a lord's face. The thing that Robb was trying to do in book 1, Arya realizes Tywin is playing this reputation, right? He is this strong and stern lord, something that Ned had to do at times. She recalled her mother once telling her father to put on his lord's face. He had laughed, but Arya could not imagine Tywin ever laughing at anything. Ironic, given the fact that in the television show, Arya is the person that makes Tywin laugh. Just a nice little note there that I think is quite cool from the books to the show. As we get into page 347. One afternoon, while waiting at the well, Arya saw a group of men ride in through Harrenhal's east gate. She recognized the manticore sigil of Sir Amory Lorches and felt a surge of hatred. Again, these were the men that basically attacked them with Yoren's party and killed Yoren. She does not like them whatsoever. In daylight, Sir Amory looked less frightening, but still had the same piggish eyes. A woman nearby said his men had been hunting Beric Dondarrion and killing rebels, and Arya thinks bitterly that we weren't rebels. We were in the Night's Watch. We were of no threat to anyone, yet we were killed. It's something that Arya is resentful against. That yes, these people are saying they're doing all these things, they're killing rebels and all this stuff, but in reality, a lot of the times they're killing the innocent. Sir Amory returned with fewer men, many of them wounded, as Arya wished their wounds would fester and kill them. At the end of the column rode 3 men that Arya was very familiar with, as again another wave of hatred and bitterness pops up. She sees Rarge Biter and Jaqen H'ghar. Rarge wore a helm that obscured his noseless face. Biter was burnt and monstrous, and Jaqen looked cleaner with brushed red and white hair. The girls giggled at Jaqen's appearance, admiring his shiny hair. He's much more attractive. He's somebody that, the girls would like. Arya regretted saving them from the fire at the Holdfast, as Gendry had warned her not to do. Yeah, it's kind of tough here, right? If you're Arya, you do this thing that saves the lives of 3 men, and it comes back to bite you, right? Those 3 men not only survive, but they join the Lannisters. Now, we know this is actually going to turn out pretty good for Arya, because she's going to get some things done by Jaqen for her, so, you have the good and the bad. They passed her by without recognition. Jaqen looked in her direction, but did not acknowledge her, and that's what Arya thinks. I 100% believe Jaqen knew she was there. That's even more backed up by the meeting they're going to have in the middle of the night. She told herself he did not recognize her as the same person. Ari the boy was gone. Now she was just a girl with a pail. That day she scrubbed steps until her hands were raw and arms trembling. Too tired to eat, she collapsed into her straw and muttered her nightly death list, with all the usual names. If you're Arya, I mean, this is just intense work for a very young girl who's not, that's not getting treated the best, right? It's a life of where you're having to live in fear and all that type of stuff. You're just exhausted. She considered adding 3 more names, but was too exhausted. She would think about it the next day. And that night, we get a very interesting thing. It's not really expanded upon in this book as much as it is in the next book, but that night she dreamed of wolves running wild in the woods. She awoke with a hand over her mouth, strong, warm, and stone-like. Now, something that I want to point out with Arya specifically. Arya seems to get these dreams of warging into Nymeria specifically a lot of times in her moments of weakness or strong emotion. They're very similar to Daenerys' dragon in dreams, especially in book 1. They're almost a reminder of who you are, right? And to have strength. And here she's going to get a little bit of her ability to act back, with Jaqen giving her the names. A voice whispered in her ear, "A girl says nothing, a girl keeps her lips closed. No one hears and friends may talk in secret, yes?" And Arya's heart pounded as she gave a small nod, getting us into page 348. If you're Arya, there's 1,000 things running through your mind. 1, is this guy actually my friend? 2, how did he know exactly where I was sleeping and all of this stuff? And 3, you gotta be thinking, if you wake up in the middle of the night and somebody has their hand around your mouth, it looks like you're probably going to die. Jaqen removed his hand from Arya's mouth. It was too dark to see, but she could smell his clean, soapy scent and perfumed hair. He told her a boy becomes a girl. Arya replied that she had always been a girl and accused him of scaring her. She told him to go away or she would call for Wheeze. That's what I would do if I'm Arya. Yes, I hate Wheeze, but Wheeze would not take very kindly to someone breaking into where they're sleeping. Jaqen said he owed her 3 deaths. She had taken 3 lives from the Red God, and 3 must be given in return. This is the real introduction into the Faceless Men. In a lot of ways, this actually kind of goes against the Faceless Men, right? Whereas the Faceless Men don't really view killing as being a personal thing. It's more just, 3 lives should be given back. It almost should be random. If you're Jaqen, it is interesting the way that that's a little different. And some people have thought of the theory that maybe Jaqen is more of a rogue faceless man, right? He's not somebody that actually, he's not somebody that fully goes along with their rules, right? Maybe like a Qui-Gon Jinn for Star Wars fans. He's somebody that kind of an outlier of the Jedi. Maybe Jaqen is somewhat similar to that because this seems, in my opinion, to go against the Faceless Men and their order, like giving Arya the ability to name 3 people she specifically wants to die. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. He tells her to speak the names and a man will do the rest. Arya, filled with hope, asked him to take her to River Run instead, but he stopped her with a finger to her lips. If you're Arya, you gotta be thinking, well, if this guy seems really clever, he's in with the Lannisters, he's not a prisoner, he's not like her or anything. If he wants to help her, why doesn't he help her get her back to her family? That is not how this thing works, right? Jaqen just wants 3 people to die. And so if you're Arya, even though that might be a disappointment, it's still giving Arya some ability to control her life, right? That she has the fate now of 3 people in her hands. Now, she's not going to use those names to the best of her ability that she could. That's why so many people love to do what ifs, and I think I've done one in the past as well. That she should just go Tywin, Cersei, maybe Tyrion or Joffrey, and be done with it. It's not as simple as that. Because if you're also Arya, you're thinking, is this guy for real? Like, is he actually gonna kill 3 people? Like, the first name that she lists is almost like just a test. It's also her emotion, right? It's like her giving into her Catelyn side, but we'll see as we go through. He repeated that she would have 3 lives, no more, no less, and must choose carefully. He kissed her hair and disappeared, leaving only a spicy scent behind. As Arya lit a candle, but a woman nearby complained, so she blew it out. She lay in the dark, seeing the faces of those she hated. Again, her first instinct is to go for people like maybe Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne, Meryn Trant, Sandor, but they were all far away. And that's the question, right? When would Jaqen kill them if she named them right now? Would it be something that Jaqen kept in the back of his mind until he ran into them or he was at where they were at? Or would he go straight there? Sir Gregor and his men were gone too, but Amory Lorch was still at Harrenhal, so was Wheeze. The next morning, Wheeze threatened to rip out Arya's tongue if she yawned again and twisted her ear. He ordered her to scrub the steps down to the 3rd landing by nightfall. That's a tough job. As she worked, Arya imagined the faces of her enemies on the steps and scrubbed harder. She told herself she would want to kill Lannisters because she was a Stark and they were at war. Arya is struggling with this idea because Arya is somebody that believes she should be the one to get revenge on all these people, not somebody else like Jaqen killing for her. And it even goes back to her echoing her father's words that the one who passes the sentence should swing the sword. She decides she should kill them herself. This is a very different idea than what we see in the show. In the show, Arya kind of just goes along with this. Arya questions this a lot. Like, she questions, well, if they die, that's not good enough. That's not satisfying enough for me. I want to be the person that kills them. And she also wasn't sure if she could truly trust Jaqen. That gets us to page 349. In the following days, Arya avoided Jaqen and continued to stay out of his way. Sir Gregor returned earlier than expected, bringing goats instead of prisoners, and lost 4 men in a raid. Arya heard that the men she hated were unscathed and had moved into the 2nd floor of the Wailing Tower. These including the men that basically were with her when she got captured. Weiss instructed Arya to ask the men if they had any clothes needing mending, which she did by running up the stairs. As she entered, Chiswick was in the middle of telling a story by the fire, and Arya knew better than to interrupt him. Chiswick recounts a time when he, Sir Gregor, and others were stuck at an alehouse due to high water after a tournament. He describes the brewer's daughter, a young, unattractive girl, and mentions how the men had been drinking and making advances towards her. Men are not great creatures. That's all I'll say, especially these men anyway. And you also think about it the way like this, how it's described. This girl is said to be unattractive apparently, but yet all these men are still going after her. It's not a good look. This is one of the worst stories I've ever heard, and I can totally understand why Arya does what she does. Chiswick talks about how the brewer asked Sir Gregor to make the men leave the girl alone, knowing Sir Gregor was an anointed knight. This man is working off of, hey, knights are supposed to be good, protect the innocent. Here his own men are fondling, his daughter. His daughter is completely innocent in this. Could you imagine? Go into the shoes of this brewer man. Your daughter is being sexually harassed by multiple men within your own home, within your line of sight, what do you do? Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to try and ask their superior for them to stop it, right? This is a very reasonable request. And as we see as we get into page 350, that is the complete opposite of what happens. I feel this is really, I think, one of the biggest stories of just the common people are abused by nobles, knights, all of that type of stuff. Sir Gregor, not paying any attention to the men's behavior, eventually commanded the brewer's daughter to be brought before him. The brewer tried to defend his daughter, calling her no whore, but Sir Gregor ignored him and claimed she was now one, tossing the brewer a silver coin. This man has much more restraint than I would. If my daughter, if I ever had a daughter and this is the way she was being treated, I would not stand for it. I would probably be one of those people like, this guy's son is going to die because he tries to protect his sister. I would probably be that person. Like, there's no way I would sit there and let my daughter get absolutely sexually assaulted by these men. But that's what happens. And this is the reality of this world. This is not something that's uncommon. This happens quite a lot, especially during war, medieval times, things like this would happen. It's a really tough thing to look at with our own history, this being something that did occur. And unfortunately, probably still occurs in the world. He assaulted the girl right in front of her father, laughing at the old man's shock. And when the girl's son interrupted, Raph killed him. So now, if you're the man, you've watched as this person assaulted your daughter and is now going to pass your daughter throughout all of his men, and one of his men killed your son. It is just a horrible thing to think about. Afterwards, Sir Gregor demanded the old man's change, claiming the girl wasn't worth the silver. The brewer, apologizing, gave Sir Gregor a handful of copper in thanks. And this is crazy, right? Not only did Sir Gregor and his men take advantage of their home, doing things that will traumatize them for the rest of their lives, he then says that their service wasn't good enough when he just sexually assaulted his daughter. Wow. You can understand why Arya's, just can't control her emotions and orders one of them to be killed. The men, including Chiswick, found the incident hilarious, and Chiswick laughed so hard that he snorted ale. Arya, watching from the shadows, returned to the cellars quietly and was punished by Weiss for not asking about the clothes, but she endured the punishment. The anger, the thirst for vengeance was on her lips. She was willing to endure everything that he threw at her, in focusing specifically on Sirio's teachings. 2 nights later, Arya served at the barracks hall, carrying wine. She noticed Jaqen Hagar across the room, and she discreetly approached, checking for wheeze, and then whispered Chiswick in Jaqen's ear. He gave no reaction. Arya wasn't even sure if he had even heard her, but Arya's named her first name. And you can understand why. I know in retrospect, we look at Arya and we go, you should have just named all these other people, but you can understand it. Everything that Arya has seen that these men have done already, and hearing this story that it makes these men laugh is just atrocious. And so you understand why Arya does it. I mean, I personally, I would give Arya credit for having the restraint of not having like 3 names being Sir Gregor, Chiswick, and Raph. Like, you got to give Arya that credit at least. But as we get into the last page of 351, Arya sees what her name has done. Arya refilled her flagon in the cellars and returned to her pouring duties, unnoticed by anyone. Nothing happened for the next 2 days, but on the third, Arya went to the kitchens with Weiss to fetch their dinner, and Weiss mentioned to a cook that one of the mountain's men had fallen off of a wall walk and broke his neck, dismissing the idea that it was Heron's ghost and suggesting it was just the usual drunkenness. Very interesting, because we see something similar to this actually happen in A Dance with Dragons with one of the deaths that occurs at Winterfell. Very interesting, right? Trying to make this look like an accident. People aren't even thinking, oh, this could have been a murder. They just think, maybe it was a ghost, maybe he was drunk. How the Faceless Men operate, that this was an accident. Arya silently thought it wasn't Heron's ghost, but her own actions that had caused the man's death. She was becoming the ghost of Harrenhal. Again, it's really interesting because there's a lot of ties to Arya here, and what we see with like Winterfell and A Dance with Dragons, there's a lot of parallels there. And I really enjoy that part of her chapter because it's kind of Arya starting to regain some of her ability to act, right? Her with Jaqen has given her some sense of pride and fulfillment, And again, it's going to lead her on this arc of revenge and destruction. It's something that I think in the show we very much see it's glamorized, here not so much. And when we see Arya, have the name for Chiswick, well, Arya is not directly killing him. Jaqen's the one killing Chiswick. And also, Chiswick gives such a horrible story, it does kind of feel like justice. But as we get to where Arya is personally killing people, and when you start to see her, for instance, she's going to break down at the end of a Storm of Swords and she's stabbing a man over and over again, you see how it's impacting her. And so this kind of starts her down that path. And we're going to end the chapter here. And that ends the chapter. So, next chapter is my favorite chapter of the book. It is I would say, probably my favorite chapter outside of the Red Wedding. And so I'm really looking forward to this. And in Game of Thrones, my favorite chapters of that book, we had to wait till the very end of it, really. That last quarter of Game of Thrones has some absolutely fantastic chapters in it. A Clash of Kings is different. A Clash of Kings has some of its great chapters sprinkled all throughout, but we're going to be getting Catelyn 3, Renly's Peaches chapter in the next one. I'm really excited for you guys to see that. I'm really excited to cover it again. I covered it on my new main channel years ago. I'm excited to jump back into it. And I'll see you guys all next week with Catelyn 3. Bye, guys.